urban planning history, we have discussed a bit in the introduction the like global planning history, if I'm not mistaken. But if you have questions about like more international stuff, like more general planning trends, sorry, my microphone's a bit weird. Um, Feel free to ask like, at any point of the presentation. Like if something sparks your interest and you want to know more, by all means, like ask the question because I feel like much interactive discussion much better for you guys, and also it helps me too. Like I remember stuff better, and then I can help you find data that's more relevant to you. Anyway, so our discussion will focus on starting at the 1500s because everything before that we don't have much data, or if we do, it's like hidden somewhere in some library now I don't have access to. Then after that, we'll talk about Spanish colonization. That's from 1600s to like 1700s. American occupation. This more, I think, more closely would be like 1800s actually. American occupation in the 1900s, post World War II and Philippine independence, and then finally contemporary planning challenges and opportunities, which probably like start like in the 2000s, where we reaped the benefits of the economic boom in the 1995 1997 period. Like basically, there was a lot of growth during the Ramos period I observed, and then it was basically downhill after Arab, ni Nindot Gamay and Gloria Arroyo's term, and then Ninoy was okay. So we're already talking about like politics. So this is going to be an interesting discussion. Okay, so this is a world map of 1700s. Of the 1700s, notice the big powers here. You have the Chinese Qing Empire. Japan was also its own thing. Manila, if you notice, it's covered in it's the same color as Spain because it's a Spanish colony. Also, notice the Spanish colonies were also existing in Southern America, and also the northern part of South America. So this is USA, south of USA, and then this is Southern America or Latin America, and these are the northern to like eastern parts. So we're all Spanish colonies. And you see the Ottoman Empire here. If you remember your archist or your history classes, this is the Muslim Empire, probably at its near peak. And then you have here Rome down here, the Roman Empire. And then you have over here, like in, I think, purple, the beginnings of the like German Empire, the Holy Roman Empire. And then in blue, you have France, and you see the French colonies here, including Canada, and a bit of the British colonies here in like Northern America and Eastern America here, where like a New York, one of the most like developed cities, not the most developed, but most like well-known cities, New York. And Africa over here has some Brazilian colonies. So this is really the state of the world in 1700s, and the Philippines was pretty much left alone. And then so the Spain had like full control of what we needed to develop, or like, what they wanted to develop. So these notes here need to be updated. These are like generalizations, not really like super accurate data because I'm not a historian. But 1500s, we started out with the Aboriginal Filipinos. So you know now that they were like temporary structures. If there were the most could be semi-permanent structures, no roads because everybody was just walking from one place to another. We had some agriculture, we had some farming, but our structures and infrastructure was really just kanang just the natural stuff, nothing like permanent with like brick or stone. And then we got colonized around like the early 1500s. In 1565, Miguel Lopez de Legazpi arrives in Cebu, established a settlement in 1567. So Cebu actually was the first colonized island in the Philippines. So as we all know, and then the popular sort of urban planning method or urban development method during this time was the grid plan. So over here on the screen, you can see an example from what do you call this? Ancient Cities, the Ideal City. This is a book I have, I think, if I remember. Um, I have a book on like the history of urban planning, but it starts out at the Roman period and ends at the sort of near kuan, just before the Renaissance or near Renaissance. It doesn't have anything on Middle Ages. Oh no, sorry, before the Middle Ages, because it's the Roman period, then the Middle Ages, then the Renaissance. So it just stops just before the Middle Ages, if anyone's like curious. Anyway, back to the grid plan. I got sidetracked. Why did people use the grid plan? Because it's like very easy to create. Like all you need is to measure a right angle and subdivide the land uh, fairly like evenly. So this means because the land is subdivided evenly, it's an equitable or fair division of the land. During the 1500s, like even like up before that, ancient times, the reason why they subdivide land evenly is so that kings, rulers, emperors would give land to their like generals who did well. So the prize of doing well, like in an invasion or a campaign, the emperor or king would give that land to their like successful generals or soldiers. And of course, even back then, land meant like money. So the more land someone owned, the richer they were. So they could like develop food, sell food, create other products like clothes, have like develop like weapons and stuff to sell, etc. So land, even back then until today, is probably one of the most important resources ever. And then finally, one weakness of the grid plan is because it's 90 degrees perpendicular line. Sometimes it doesn't respond well to the land, meaning you can't make a grid plan or develop a grid city on like a hilly terrain. So ideal location for these ancient cities or like 1500 cities, usually flat plains. So if we go back to Cebu, the first area was in the Colon area, which is basically a flat plain. And then as you go further inland, it became more and more difficult to develop because we're already reaching the mountainous areas. So that's why they settled here in the Colon area. So this is the peak, probably like the when Spanish colonization was at its height, like the 1600s to the 1700s. So we had in Cebu, Fort San Pedro. In Manila, we had Intramuros. And how they developed this land is they followed the rules and guidelines of the laws of the Indies. Basically, Spain's like development plan for colonies. So how do you develop a colony? Where do you set up your town? Where do you set up your like fortifications? The key thing for the laws of the Indies, it dictated that all new colonies would have a central plaza, and on the central plaza you would have your church, your government buildings, your like city halls, and around the central plaza you have your residential areas and commercial areas. And just like trivia, No Limitangere was published in 1887 and El Filibusterismo in 1891. And then this is also coincides with the time, the 1800s, with the Industrial Revolution. So one of the big developments in the Industrial Revolution was the steam engine factory. So a lot of new jobs were being created in cities, and this like further increased sort of this influx of people migrating from the rural areas or the urban periphery into like city centers. And some additional information on the laws of the Indies. These were a compilation of laws issued by the Spanish Kingdom. It regulated social, political, religious, and economic life. And the fourth book of the 1690 compilation described the town planning guidelines. So I just got this off Wikipedia. I'm not a historical expert by any means, but just something for you to know that even back then, there are already planning guidelines, building codes. And this is just a quote from the book like I found on Wikipedia. So this tells the planners where to develop their site. The site must be in an elevated and healthy location with means of fortification. It needs to have fertile soil with plenty of land for farming, have fuel like timber and resources, have access to fresh water, and a native population because they usually use the native population to build these things, slavery and all that. Ease of transport and exit. So it needs to be near the port area. It needs to have like usually they're coming in ships, so you need to have some body of water. And then some things that they don't want is obviously open to the north wind, and if on the coast, due consideration should be paid to the quality of the harbor, and that the sea does not lie to the south or west. I'm not sure what is the like significance of having a body of water to the south or west. Maybe it's like like a military thing, it could be a climate thing, I'm not sure. If possible, near lagoons or marshes, uh, in which if possible, the settlement should not be near lagoons or marshes because they have poisonous animals, polluted air and water. So again, even back then, they were thinking about the quality of the environment and where to locate their new cities. And then over here we have the Washington D.C. La Font Plan, sort of French, if you can't tell, urban planner design the Washington D.C. city. So notice, I think I can zoom in a bit more over here. I just want it to be bigger on the screen. Uh, I can't seem to find it. Anyway, notice the grid plan, but now with intersected by diagonal streets. And where the intersection happens of two diagonal streets, where a cross is formed, usually they would put a historical landmark, a statue, um, basically to commemorate important individuals and to raise local pride in their city. And this is something that's like missing in Cebu and Manila. We have our landmarks, but we overshadow them with like commercial buildings. So wala historical significance, wala cultural significance. And what happens both in a conscious and subconscious level, people tend to care less about the environment. So that's why we have things like people just toss trash everywhere. People don't care about the aesthetics of the place, don't care about the quality of the built environment. So they start moving out into the suburbs where there's nothing there. They hate being in the city, but they have to come to the city to work. So that also adds problems with traffic because they want to live further away. So they have to travel further away. So there will be more needs for cars and like highways. And that's just like bad planning. That's unsustainable city planning. And you can see the beginnings of this in the 1900s. So in the 1900s, we had the first railway in Manila in 1890, and then the first railway in Cebu in the just early 1900s. One of the biggest sort of inventions in the 1900s is the private car, which became popular in the U.S. and I think several other countries in Asia, most notably the Philippines because we were a U.S. colony. Um, in Europe, they were also fascinated by the car, but because their cities were already developed before the car, they were still very walkable and they were able to sort of not become as car dependent as newer cities that were constructed or formed or founded in like the 1900s. So you can see Cebu City hasn't really developed out yet. It's probably 20% its current size, and you can see the railway here in red. This railway was destroyed in World War II or was in a state of disrepair even before that. So it connected Danao to the north and Argao to the south. And sayang lang that the railway was here. If it was properly maintained, it could have solved a lot of problems we have today. So this is a common trend in urban planning that a lot of the solutions were already there historically. It's just they were forgotten because they felt like at that time now it's outdated, it's not anymore relevant. So this is one important thing about learning urban planning history is that you see that a lot of the solutions were already built in naturally into the city, but it could be the government or the private sector who just feel like, oh, we don't need this anymore, so we'll throw it away, or like we'll build on top of it. And then over here in the upper right side, you see a typical Philippine street. I think this is in Manila. So notice it kind of looks like a European city, which now in 2022, we barely have streets that look like this. Or like if it's like this, it's very decrepit, very old, very forgotten. So the aesthetics of our cities are slowly kanang, not really slowly, but um, are already very kanang old, out of date, not well maintained, and like very much forgotten. And then some of the bigger problems in urban planning in the 1900s was overcrowding and overpopulation because again, cities were a magnet for people because they wanted to find more work, they wanted a better life for them and their family, they wanted to like expand their horizons. So cities were the place to do this because a lot of people were coming together, which meant more economic opportunity, which translated to more economic activity. And then when you have a lot of people living together in a small place, the next big problem is really waste. Let me double check. Am I sharing my screen? Okay, I am sharing my screen. Just I get paranoid. Let me share back to slideshow. Ang audio quality okay, ra?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes,
Just
sir.
wanted to check in case halfway through Nico's presentation. Anyway, so overcrowding leads to pop pollution. Yeah, a lot of people living together, so they need to eat, they need to poop, they need to throw their waste. So in 1850s London, this was the image over here. You can see it looks like Manila or Cebu, like the downtown area. A lot of people just stuck together. You have all these like um, shack sort of stores, like sidewalk stores. It looks very overcrowded. So this guy over here on the right hand side is Ebenezer Howard. He was an officer of the Order of the British Empire, like a soldier, and became a knight bachelor in 1927. He wrote his book even before that in 1898 called Tomorrow, A Path to Real Reform, a peaceful path to real reform. So this was a bit because there were a lot of conflicts going on in London during this time, like small, like civil wars probably. And then he thought of an idea where we could urban planners at that time, they weren't really called urban planners, just like engineers. We should add more open space to cities. So this would allow the city to breathe, have more space to manage our waste. And he developed this idea called a town country. So in this page over here on the right hand side, he made this diagram of the three magnets. So the town is what he calls the city, and the country is what he calls the rural area. So if you look over at the page here, the town has closing out of nature, social opportunity, isolation of crowds, plagues of amusement, distance from work, high money wages, high rent and prices, chances of employment. So already it's already sounding like what cities are today. And this was written way back 1898. And then how does he describe the rural areas? Lack of society, gamay rag tao, beauty of nature, hands out of work, land lying idle, trespassers beware, wood, um, meadow, forest, long hours, low wages. So similar to like what our agriculture sector is feeling right now. Fresh air, low rents, lack of drainage, abundance of water, so etc. etc. And then what you proposed was to combine the town and the country into what he called the town country. So you have the beauty of nature and the high opportunities of cities. And then he proposed this garden city diagram where you have a central city and satellite cities around it, and between them are open green spaces. So that was an idea way back 1900s. And then you can see this map of like Cebu City, 1873. This was just from Wikipedia. You can see that we didn't have that problem of overcrowding, 1870s Cebu, because we didn't have the population. The sort of local Cebuanos were sort of forced out by the Spaniards, so they probably went to the north, south, and west of Cebu province. And the only developed part was really the Colon area. You have the beginnings of Fort San Pedro over here, Plaza Independencia. You have the City Hall. Where is it? Like somewhere here. And you have Magellan's Cross would be, I think, this one over here. I'm not sure. I can't tell. The map is like not the best. And you have a lot of agricultural areas here to the west or to the left side of the map. Yeah, north is up. And then just small settlements to the northern areas. And then the rest is agricultural open space. So not really crowded at all. And then this is a map of 1905 Manila. Um, Basically, the Burnham Plan. Daniel Burnham was a Chicago-based architect and like also practiced urban planning. Although at the time it wasn't called urban planning, it was just called city planning or town planning. Not really an official profession, but he wanted to do a plan for Manila. This was probably during the time that we became part of the um, American colonies. I think we were ceded to America from Spain in 1898 or 1899, something like that. And then this was the plan for Manila. You see Intramuros over here where my mouse is, and you see all the sort of diagonal streets that was like implemented in DC, and I wanted to do the same thing in Manila. One thing Daniel Burnham noted was that Manila had this like river. I think this is the Pasig River, if I'm not mistaken, and he really wanted to make full advantage of that. Of course, he applied the proper setbacks so that people can actually see and enjoy the natural vistas provided by the river. Okay. Now we're in 1970 Cebu. Notice that the same sort of grid plan was applied because I think Burnham and his contemporaries also worked in Cebu for a time. And this is when like Fuente Osmeña Circle was created, the capital site was created. We had the agricultural reform code. We had RA 3844. That was 1963. I can't remember what RA 3844 was. Let me just look that up. RA 3844. Could be like an agricultural act. The act or to ordain the Agricultural Land Reform Code and Institute. Okay, so it's the Agricultural Reform Code over here. Whoops, sorry. Where's my slides? Okay. Um, we had the Macapagal administration from 1961 to 65. And of course, the Marcos era from 65 to 86, martial law from 72 to 81, snap election in 86, and then the Aquino sort of like period from 86 to 92. So there's a period of like a lot of turbulence, political turbulence. Also a period of a lot of growth. During the Marcos era, a lot of like public buildings and civic structures were built. We have the beginnings of the first local like national architects, well-known Philippine architects like Leandro Locsin and his contemporaries. And then there's still like that shadow of martial law, but still on the brighter side, a lot of things got developed. And just so you know, I am not Bongbong. I'm not sure if like definitely not Bongbong though. But I won't tell you who I'm voting for, so you won't be influenced. Okay. Global situation. Europe focus on the decentralization of new towns. This was from a book called Urban Planning and Development by Ratcliffe et al., published in 2009. America focused on highways and interstate mobility. So they're basically focusing on centralization, while at around the same time, Europe was focused on decentralization, creating more satellite towns, while America was just a focus on core development. So similar to what's happening here in Cebu, we have a bit of that, a bit of centralization, a bit of decentralization. You see the cities developing inwards because there's more and more people. Colon area was already pretty much full. 1970s, like Colon area is probably full of like 4-story medium-rise buildings. We didn't have a lot of high-rise during this time. I can't remember when Crown Regency was built, but there was not enough sort of economic growth to necessitate high-rise construction. Now there's already a lot of high-rise buildings in Cebu. And then Asia here, just based on my observations, I don't really have a lot of info outside of the Philippines. So this could be like a research topic for you guys if you want to do that. So 1944 Cebu, this is a photo, an aerial photo. You see Fuentes Mania Circle, capital site, and where Guadalupe is now, it's all agricultural land here. Where is my north? North is, I think it's kind of like tilted 45 degrees. So north might be like here, this side to the right. And then you have Guadalupe here. Colon area still looks like this. You have the port area. And then not as dense yet. But I really want to highlight how much agricultural land Cebu City used to have. And it's because commercial areas get more money, they switch from agriculture to industrial and commercial development. And over here is the damage in Manila during World War II. Cebu City also had a lot of damage, but there's not much photographs of that. So this is like 1970s. We have the rise of the modernist architects, and they also designed like new ideas or created new ideas for cities. One of the most popular architects slash planner is Le Corbusier. He created this like radiant city plan where he imagined high-rise office buildings in the center of Paris with medium-rise. You see the medium-rise buildings are here. This is the thing he's fiddling around with, is here next to the high-rise buildings. Some articles got confused. Basically, America also in general got confused and thought the high-rise towers were the residential buildings when in fact Le Corbusier wanted only mid-rise maximum for residential development. This goes back to housing. I think the only place where high-rise housing has worked so far is Singapore, and there's a lot of studies about the psychological and social impacts of living in high-rise buildings. Because for the most part, even back then in the 70s, people realized that living in high-rise towers isn't really comfortable and it's not good for like the social and psychological growth of like people. But for some reason, it works in Singapore, and that could be another research opportunity. And this is like an image of 1970s Filipinos, and this one are 1970s streets. You see a lot of cars, but also a lot of pedestrians walking on the streets. And now it's only cars, and pedestrians are like pushed further and further to the periphery of the urban area. Over here is a 1970s image of Magellan's Cross. They still had cars going through that, so it's a good thing. One good thing is like they make it fully pedestrianized, so you can appreciate the site. You can appreciate the culture and then like walk around, so it becomes a more meaningful site. That's why like the Santo Nino, not the Santo Nino, Magellan's Cross is a well-known symbol landmark for Cebu City. And then around the same time, 1960s America, we have like people like Jane Jacobs, Kevin Lynch, and their contemporaries fighting for the right, or like um, to shift urban planning from developing a lot of highways to preserving parks. So you can still develop your highways, but at least don't demolish our open spaces. Talking about the pedestrians, the importance of local communities, because highways were being built at such a fast rate and at large quantities. They were destroying old neighborhoods. And Jane Jacobs, Kevin Lynch, and their contemporaries said that these old neighborhoods are the foundation of our cities. So sort of it's contrasting with what's going on in Cebu, where we're kind of like forgetting our downtown areas, our colon areas, and these areas are really the cultural centers, the basically what makes Cebu Cebu, and like wherever you are in your like local area, like the historical area should be preserved because at this time history culture wasn't really a thing. I think even until now. And then over here, this document, the screenshot of a document here on the right side, is the Town and Country Planning Act of 1947, published in the UK, talking about how land should be managed. And I just thought it was neat that to show you that they had central and local administration, development plans, control of development back in the 1940s. So they're very much into regulating the use of land even during this time. So this is something that Cebu City, I don't think is doing pretty well because our land use plan, our government is not. I wouldn't say corrupt. It's not so much a corruption. It's also just like they're not very good. Like there's no one advocating for like the organization of land. Creating maps of what's going on in Cebu City. Like no one knows what's going on in Cebu City, even though I don't think even the government knows what's going on in Cebu City. And like in a very complete sense, they're only focused on areas that like get the money, and those areas that are like forgotten have not been developed or improved or maintained at all. Like for the past 50 years, pasagdan lang. This is why we have this like spaghetti wires everywhere. We don't know where our drainage systems are, so whenever it floods, we don't know how to fix it. We try to create new sort of drainage systems. So because we don't know where the old drainage system is, there's a lot of conflict, and that takes a lot of time. And then the problems just compile and compile. Especially with Cebu City also growing at the same time. So we're increasing the number of population. And of course, as we mentioned earlier, if you have a large number of people living together in a city, you have like problems with waste. Where does the poop go? People need to eat. Where does the trash go when they're done eating, like their wrappers, all that stuff? So waste management probably one of the bigger issues in Cebu. And connected with waste management is the drainage system plan. And then on top of all that, because you have a lot of people, you also have to worry about transportation, and that all ties into sustainability and resilience. And resilience, I think, for as we discussed last week, it's just easier to quantify and easier to like make proposals for, because the sustainability and the SDG goals are very, very big and like sort of like too difficult for Cebu at the moment. Maybe when we get all our systems fixed, or like at least documented, so we know where all the drainage are, where all the electrical wires supposed to be, so we can clean up our city. So this will probably take very easily 50 years of work. But if you do it pretty well, maybe we can do it in like 25 years. So that's why it's good that we have people who work in government or like work closely with government, so they can like either fix Cebu, or if you're not from Cebu, make sure your country doesn't, your city doesn't end up like Cebu. Manila, I don't know what's going. Manila, they're trying their best to like help it better, but I think Cebu is in a better situation compared to Manila. Okay, some notable dates here. This won't be coming out in the quiz. This is just sort of to contextualize what's going on. We had the Ramos era from Ramos period from 92 to 98. We had the Asian financial crisis. I'm not really sure what happened, that what was the event that triggered this, but like economic growth in Asia was really slow in 97. We had the Estrada administration, which was from 98 to 2001. Arroyo from 2001 to 2010. We had Aquino from 2010 to 2016. We had the application of K to 12, which was interesting for me because I'm a teacher. In 2013, there was a period in colleges where we didn't have any first years because of K to 12. We had Yolanda in 2013. I'm sure Joseph would know. We had 2016 Duterte, and then we had the like Duterte's like administration from 2016 to present until like probably like at 2022, like because we were gonna have elections in May, I think. Is it May? I've been away from the Philippines, so I'm not sure when our elections are. Okay. And then key development areas in Cebu, particularly, is the Ayala Business Park, which was established in 1992, the Cebu IT Park, which was established in 2000, and then the South Road Properties is also established in the 2000s. So it'll be very interesting for those who know QGIS or in my QGIS class, and we could probably map these three areas out and maybe like study like what could be the best use, or like are they using this in a sustainable way? Are they developing in a sustainable way, etc., etc.? And then over here, this is like the JICA document. If you want a copy, we can discuss this further. Probably like what time is it? It's 3:22. We could probably go through it today. Um, just like at the topics like overview, and then talking about waste management and transportation, because I know we have one student here is Faye, working in the transportation sector, which may be useful for her. And of course we had the pandemic, which is thankfully slowing down. Like probably we're going to get through it by next year. Hopefully no more infections and deaths because of COVID. And this is where we're at. So um, that's about 400 years of development. So one thing I really want you guys to take away, that the solutions were already there even back in the 1500s. It's just that um, could it be the government sector or the private sector just had different intentions or agendas, such that they had negative impacts on the built environment. So, as urban planners, architects, and engineers who are aware of history, our goal is to sort of maintain what's good and try to steer development in a way that is sustainable and resilient. And I know easier said than done. So, that's this lecture over here. I'm going to take a quick break to get some water. I'll stop recording and we'll go into the next discussion.